So, beautiful day to talk about financial aid, too. So, as Mrs. Slight said, my name is Kristen Isaacson. I'm Associate Director of Financial Aid at Monmouth University, and I am here to talk to you about the financial aid process. And yes, the presentation is general in nature. Any school that accepts federal financial aid funds, you'll find the presentation helpful. One question I have for you is, by show of hands, how many senior families do I have? Oh, the vast, okay, do I have any junior families? A couple, okay, all right, so that helps me with some things to make sure that you're all aware of. So, the topics we're going to cover tonight, we are going to talk about terms and tools that you'll need through the financial aid process. We're going to talk about completing the 2023-2024 free application for federal student aid, or FAFSA. This is the application from the federal government for all of the federal aid programs. We'll talk about types and sources of aid, about the aid programs themselves, and at the end and during the whole presentation, I'll be giving you tips as well. So, before we even get started, I do want to let you know that there is change coming in the future. This is part of the reason why I was asking for the breakdown of seniors to juniors. So, there are changes coming with the 24-25 FAFSA. So that's not the one we're talking about tonight, it's the following year. So, but it means for my junior families, it's your first one. And for my senior families, it's the second one you'll be completing. So everything tonight that I'm talking about is appropriate for the upcoming school year, 2023-2024. But I want you to keep in mind that there are changes expected in the questions on the FAFSA, on the federal aid application, along with the data collected. What's called the federal methodology, which we'll talk about, the formula behind the FAFSA, and some terminology. So I don't want anyone to panic, but I just do want to let you know that there are changes coming down the pike. Bless you. So first thing I want to tell you about is a website. It is studentaid.gov. This is the federal government's one-stop shop for everything related to federal financial aid. You can learn on studentaid.gov about all of the federal aid programs. You can complete the FAFSA. You can complete federal loan applications. If you do borrow, you can manage them after you're out of school. So lots of functionality on this website. The application for 23-24 will be available on October 1st. So that's coming up this weekend. So senior families, you've got a couple days before opening day. So realize October 1st is just day one. You'll want to check with the colleges your student is interested in to find out if they have a specific deadline. Many times you'll find the deadlines coordinate potentially with the type of admission process you're using. So, my early decision people, you're submitting your admission application early. Your FAFSA may be due early. Early action a little bit later, regular decision maybe a little bit later. That's going to be up to the colleges to make their determinations for deadlines, so make sure that you check. You're also going to need to complete a FAFSA for every year, for every student that you have in college. The FAFSA is a student aid application, not a family aid application. So each student needs their own application, even twins need their own application. And you're going to be using income information from 2 years prior. So that means for the 23-24 FAFSA, you'll be using your 2021 income information. So those are the taxes you would have completed for this past April 15th, hopefully. So that income should be complete and verified by the IRS at this time. It's still possible if anyone's on an extension, it is still possible to complete the application, even if you're on extension. Okay, so I told you we would talk about this federal methodology. So what happens when you complete this federal aid application? You're providing lots of data. Income data, household size data, information for student, parent, things like that. So all of the information, we're taking that and running it through a formula that's been created by Congress. That's called the federal methodology. And then this formula gives us the output is something called your expected family contribution. An expected family contribution is a number. So again, all the data you put on the FAFSA gets run through this federally mandated formula. The output is a number that we call your expected family contribution. The expected family contribution is the measurement of the students and the family's ability to pay for post-secondary educational expenses. What I like to point out in this slide is that you've got the contribution from the student as well as from the parents. So for students that are putting parental information on their FAFSA, realize that you've got that contribution from both. So that means student income, student assets all do have to be reported on the FAFSA, and they go into that expected family contribution number. Also, some of the things about the expected family contribution. It is basically an index number that's used by the financial aid office to determine the student's aid eligibility for the upcoming school year. It stays the same regardless of college choice, because remember, the EFC is based on all the information from the student and the family. So it belongs to the student, it's not belongs to the college. So the student's expected family contribution would be the same, regardless of where they're applying to or where they're admitted to. Also, understand that the expected family contribution is not the amount of money you will necessarily pay, and nor is it the amount of federal aid your student will receive. Okay, a couple more terms. One is the cost of attendance. So you might see this in information that you're receiving from colleges. You'll see information about cost of attendance on a college's website. So what is it? It's basically the overall cost to attend an institution for the school year. We include both direct and indirect expenses in the cost of attendance. Direct expenses are things that the college will bill you for, like tuition and fees, room and meals if you're living on campus. But we also have indirect expenses like books and supplies, transportation, personal expenses, because we want students to understand that it's not just being able to pay your bill. You need to be able to cover these additional costs as well to be able to attend. You know, all students do need some funds for their books and supplies. Transportation, why do we need to worry about transportation? Students need to get to and from campus. And that means different things depending upon where they're going to school. Are they attending somewhere that they're going to drive every day and live at home potentially? Well, that's a cost in itself, maintaining a car, the gas to put in the car. Student going a little bit further away, is it someplace that's maybe even a plane ride away? So these are considerations when you're looking at schools, is to make sure that you can afford to also get to and from the institution besides just paying the bill. And personal expenses are things like clothing and toiletries and entertainment and things like that. Just things to help you live while you're in school. Okay, so last term that I want to tell you about is financial need. When you read through materials, some of the things that I brought for you this evening, you'll see many things referred to as this is a need-based aid program. So what does that mean, and who has financial need? Well, we have this little equation here to determine who has financial need and for how much. We take that cost of attendance, the overall cost to attend the college for the school year. We subtract from it that expected family contribution that we get from filing your federal aid application, and that gives us your financial need. Let's put that with some numbers so that it makes it a little bit realistic. So on my slide here, I'm looking at two different schools with two very different costs of attendance. My first school, cost of attendance is $40,000. In my example, my expected family contribution is $15,000, leaving me $25,000 in financial need at that school. But I'm also looking at another school, cost of attendance of $70,000. EFC still stays at $15,000, leaving me $55,000 in financial need at that second school. So in real life, what does that mean? At school A, I can receive up to $25,000 in need-based financial aid. At school 2, up to $55,000 in need-based financial aid if it's available. Not every college and university across this country can fulfill 100% of need for all of its students. You can Google colleges that fulfill 100% of financial need to see which schools can. The rest of us just try to fulfill as much of that financial need that the student has as possible. So one of the tools that I want to give you for getting an early read on financial aid eligibility is something called the Net Price Calculator. Every college and university across the country has to have what's called a Net Price Calculator on their website. And what does it do? It provides you with an estimate of the student's aid eligibility at that specific college. What you'll do is you'll go on to the net price calculator at the school you're looking at, enter some income information, and then it will provide you with that estimate of both the aid eligibility as well as cost information for that school. So it's an early way to have an idea, is this school a reach for us financially? Might we be comfortable at this institution? So you can start to have an idea. Not only do you like where this school is, do you like the atmosphere, does it have the major, does it look like it may be affordable to us? Now, one of the things about the net price calculator is there's not one place to go to just do this. They're all specific to each of the colleges. But I do have one little time saver. The link at the bottom of the screen will take you to a site where you can enter the name of the school in a box, and it will take you directly to that school's net price calculator, because you could have to spend a little time digging on a school's website to find it. Generally, it's going to be in their financial aid pages, which fall under the admission office usually. So it just saves a little searching time, but it's not a place to just enter your information once and you're done. You would still have to do it multiple times if your student is looking at multiple schools. Okay, so when we get down to business and want to complete our FAFSA, one of the things that we need is something called an FSA ID. The FSA ID is a username and password that's used to access the FAFSA application and also serves as the legal signature on the application. Both the student and one parent need an FSA ID. So it's important to note, student and parent need this. You both have to sign off on the application. It's important to note when you're creating the FSA ID, triple check Social Security numbers. That information is going to be checked with the Social Security Administration, so you want to make sure that the information is correct. Also, when it asks for an email address and a mobile phone number, student needs to put their information when they're creating their FSA ID. Parents, you put yours when you're creating your FSA ID. The reason for that is email and mobile phone number are used as ways to retrieve this information when you forget it. And if two people are sharing the same information, there's no way to retrieve it. So it won't let you use that information more than once. And it should only be used by the person that it's assigned to. So that means that a student should sign their own FAFSA. Parents, you should be applying your FSA ID as well. One of the handouts that I brought to help you with your FSA ID, it's a handout that's called Creating and Using the FSA ID. So this gives you some other tips and helpful hints and whatnot on the handout. And for my parents that already have a student in college, you already have an FSA ID, you can keep using it for that second student, just that your second or third student will have to create their own FSA ID. Okay, so when we go to complete the FAFSA, we want to complete it online. Now, yesterday, when I went onto the student aid website, they'd made a few little changes. So bear with me, because this is the first time that I'm talking about these changes in public, because I just noticed them yesterday. So studentaid.gov has multiple menus up at the top of the screen. Now, one of them says FAFSA form. So if you're on studentaid.gov, you go to that FAFSA form menu, hit the drop down, and hit complete the FAFSA form, which is the top choice. This is what the screen's going to look like. Obviously, you see it says, welcome to the FAFSA form, and then asks you to check whether you're the student, you're the parent, or you're a preparer. And that's how you would get started. Alternately, if you just remember the site fafsa.gov, it will bring you to a screen that looks like this. You'll be able to click on the button that says Start Here, And that's what you would use if you're a brand new applicant to the FAFSA. It doesn't matter which way you get to it. It's just that some people may be used to one way and some are used to another. And now what you see is not the same if you go from studentaid.gov and from the menu or through FAFSA.gov. So I apologize for that, but this way you know where you're going to complete the application. Okay, I also want to give you some information about what you'll see when you go into the FAFSA on the web, because there's a lot of information on each screen to help you when completing the application. My arrow in the upper left, the very upper left, that one is pointing out the status bar, so you can monitor your progress as you go along. Green check mark means you've completed that portion. The circle that's blue, that means you're working on that portion, and then the other circles with no color means you have those portions left to do. So that helps give you a visual of how much more you have to complete. The next arrow down on the left points to where on this slide it says student information. So as I said in the beginning, this is a student application for aid. The majority of the information on the form is about the student. So you need to make sure that on the pages that say student information, you enter information about the student. If it says parent information, you enter parent information. I wouldn't point this out if there weren't problems with this, so please be mindful of it. Parents, if you're going to sit down and do this all yourself, what we find a lot is you might get the demographics okay, but then you forget who you are when you get to the income portion. And what happens is you report your income as the parent as your student's income, and then you report it again in the parent section. So that means your student and you make the same amount of money. And I'm going to think that that's probably not the case, and that would greatly affect their aid eligibility. So please make sure that you're putting the appropriate information on the appropriate pages. And also, it reminds you on my arrow here on the right that always when you're in the application, you and your refers to the student when you're completing the form. And last but not least, if you're not sure how to answer a question, the box at the end of it will have a little question mark. Hover over that, it will open up help text to help you with that specific question and provide and flesh out more information to assist you in answering that specific question. There are some general eligibility requirements that students do need to meet in order to be eligible to complete the FAFSA. They need to earn a high school diploma or its equivalent. They need to be accepted for enrollment in an eligible program. They also need to be a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen and have a valid social security number. So these are all for the student. Okay, so one of the other forms, handouts that I brought with me, it says FAFSA on the web worksheet on the top of it. This is truly a worksheet. You don't send this anywhere. It's not an official FAFSA form, but it helps us tonight to be looking at the types of questions that you need to be prepared for when you complete the FAFSA. If sitting down at your computer with the cursor blinking at you waiting for an answer would drive you a little crazy, you can work out your answers on the paper before you would go on the computer, and then you're working on transferring information versus running to collect documents and things like that. So it can be helpful that way, but you can see when you get to the bottom, the end of it, it says do not mail this worksheet. So again, it's just yours to work out answers. I'm going to go over in general the types of information that you'll need to complete the FAFSA so that you'll be prepared for you'll be prepared in a few days when the application opens. So as I said, student demographic information, we're looking at their citizenship status, their marital status, state of legal residence, the level of schooling completed by parents. Then they'll move into their college search section. This is where you list the colleges that you want to receive this FAFSA. Every college is going to ask for the FAFSA, and they're going to need it in order to put the student's financial aid package together. So you'll be able to list up to 10 schools when you complete the FAFSA. If your student is looking at more than 10 institutions when they complete the FAFSA, this is what you need to do. Fill it up with 10, let it process. It will take a few days for processing. You'll be notified when it's done. When it's done, you log back into the application, and you'll be able to overwrite that section. So if you have 5 more, overwrite 5 of the initial ones that were sent the FAFSA and submit it again. You'll need to make sure you both sign off on it to submit it. And then that way, the additional 5 schools will receive your application. It cannot go to more than 10 schools at one time. The next section is student dependency status, and this section determines whether or not parental information will go on the FAFSA. When you look at the worksheet that we have here tonight, you see a bunch of statements with a little box next to them. When you go on to the FAFSA, they're yes/no questions. So basically how this portion works is if none of the items that we'll talk about on this slide and the next one apply to your student, you'll be putting parent information on the FAFSA. So we have, was the student born before January 1, 2000? Is the student married? Are they serving on active duty in the U.S. Armed Forces, or are they a veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces? Since turning age 13, are both parents deceased? Was a student in foster care or made a dependent or ward of the court? Is a student an emancipated minor? Is a student in legal guardianship? And with legal guardianship, it means 2 people outside of the parents. Is a student working on a master's or doctorate program in 2023, 2024? Does the student have children who live with them and receive more than half of their support from the student? Does the student have dependents other than children who live with them and receive more than half of their support from them? Is the student homeless or at the risk of being homeless? So as I said, if none of these items apply to your student, you'll be moving on and putting parent information on the FAFSA. I know some of them seem a little strange for 17, 18-year-old students, but realize that the FAFSA is one application. Doesn't matter how old you are. You can be 70 or 17. You could be getting an associate's degree or a PhD. It's the same application, just depending upon your circumstances, you may be filling out the questions differently than someone else. Okay, parents, here we go. Here's some information that you'll want to be prepared with when you go to complete the FAFSA. Now, in the beginning, I mentioned that the income information you'll be using for 2023, 2024 will be from 2021. Now, that's your income information. There are a few items on the FAFSA that will be as of the day you complete the application. One of those items is your marital status. So when it asks, what is your marital status? And it says, as of the day the FAFSA is completed, you'll have a choice of never married, unmarried, and both legal parents living together, married or remarried, divorced or separated, or widowed. So those are your choices on the FAFSA. I'm going to give you some examples so that hopefully everyone can understand some of the different statuses and what it means when you complete the FAFSA. So I have a student whose name is John. He lives with his parents who are married to each other. Goes to fill out the FAFSA, marital status is married, and then he puts information for both of his parents on the FAFSA. Now, let's say John's parents get divorced, and John remains living with his mother. When they go to fill out the FAFSA, the marital status is divorced, and they'll only put the mother's information on the FAFSA. The way that the FAFSA works currently is that the parent that goes on the FAFSA in divorce or separated situations is the parent that the student lived with more during the last 12 months. It doesn't matter what your divorce decree requires. It doesn't matter who claims the child on a tax return. You can have certain rules for the IRS, different rules for the FAFSA. So it's again the parent, it's the custodial parent that would go on the FAFSA in the divorce or separated situations. But now, one more situation. Let's say John continues to live with his mother, who marries someone else. Then they go to complete the FAFSA. The marital status is remarried. When we go to put in the parent information, he's going to put both his mother's and the step-parents' information on the FAFSA. So step parents are required to be reported on the FAFSA. It is not obligating the step parent to pay for that student's education, but their income is a resource in that household, and it will go into that expected family contribution number. After you get through the marital status, you will be asked about the household size and the number in college. Household size always includes 1 or 2 parents, depending upon the marital status. You'll always have at least 1 child, the one that this FAFSA is for, any other children that you support, more than 50%, and any other people living in your household to whom you provide more than 50% of their support. When you go to complete this question, they do have some visual graphics to make sure you've gotten everyone in the household. This year, knock on wood, was really great for us for household size, but we've had problems. Students leave off their siblings. We had a student leave off their twin. How do you forget? You know, so you do want to make sure you get everybody together and make sure that you put them all on the FAFSA. You'll also currently be asked for the number in college, which is always at least 1 for the student that you're completing this FAFSA for. If you have any other children that are in college, you can adjust accordingly. Parents, be prepared to also provide social security number, name, and birth date. Again, triple check, make sure it's correct, because it will be checked with the Social Security Administration. And finally, you'll also be asked about your state of legal residence. Okay, when we get to the income portions of the FAFSA, they are separated out for student and for parent, but the questions are exactly the same. How you answer those questions may be different, but the questions themselves are exactly the same. And one of the tools that we have to assist you with the income portion of the FAFSA is what's called the IRS data retrieval tool. This allows you to transfer your income information from the IRS directly into the FAFSA in real time. You will authenticate your identity with the IRS before transferring any data. Make sure that you do double check the information you're entering to make sure it matches your tax return. The data retrieval authentication process is sensitive enough that if on your taxes you live at 123 Main Street, and on your taxes you wrote out the word street, but then you tried to put in ST to authenticate, it's not going to work because it's not exactly the same as it was on your taxes. When you go into the data retrieval tool, you'll have the option to say yes or no to transfer the data. If you do, it takes like a second for the data to transfer, and the elements that it does transfer will be marked as transferred from IRS. You won't see the actual numbers. Why is that? For security purposes. When we first moved into this data sharing with the IRS, there was a situation where I guess you could people that are not you could see your income information when it was transferred over. I am not an IT security person. I don't know how that would happen, but the way that they got around that was to mask the data, and it says transferred from IRS. So you'll still know that the question's been completed. If you're able to transfer your income from the IRS, it's been finalized with the IRS, so the information is correct. Also, some things about the data retrieval tool. Schools and state agencies, we do receive your actual income figures because we need that information in order to do our jobs. If you are a joint filer with your taxes, currently what you'll need to do is you will need to fill in the income earned from work for each of you. The data retrieval tool doesn't do math, so it doesn't know from the grand total of wages for the 2 of you on the tax return who made what portion of that. So those 2 fields will be blank. Make sure you do go in and fill in appropriately, and 0 is an answer for the FAFSA. So if one of you works and one of you doesn't, that's fine. Just make sure in the you have 0 for one person and then the wages for the other person. And don't change the IRS data. Again, this information's been finalized with the IRS. If you go changing it, we will know. At the schools, we'll get a certain code on the processed information that we receive that tells us you changed things after you transferred, and we're going to be asking you for documentation about that. So that could slow up your students' process for receiving aid. You may be asked questions about your assets when you complete the FAFSA. So like marital status, assets are as of the day you complete the FAFSA. So another item that's as of the day you complete the FAFSA. If you do have to complete the asset questions, there'll be 3 of them. As of today, what do you have in cash savings and checking accounts? Your investment net worth and the net worth to any business or farm. So cash savings and checking, easy enough. Add up all those accounts. Cash also means what's in your wallet, what's in the mattress, what are you hiding in the walls, wherever your hiding place might be, you do need to add that all together. Investments. So let's take a few minutes to talk about investments. What I like to tell you is the things that are not considered investments for the FAFSA, because the list is significantly shorter than what does count as an investment. So exclusions from investments on the FAFSA: the home you live in, the value of any life insurance that you have, and the amount you have saved in a retirement plan. So again, the home you live in, the value of any life insurance, and what you have saved in your retirement plan, whether it's a 401k, a pension fund, an annuity, non-education IRA, whatever it's called. If it is a retirement fund, you do not have to report how much you have saved in that account. Those are the 3 exclusions. Everything else counts. So if you own stocks outside of your retirement fund, those have to be counted. Bonds, money market accounts, mutual funds, trust funds, real estate beyond the home that you live in. So if you have a shore house down near where I live, you have to report that. If you have a condo in Florida, I hope it's out of the hurricane's way, and you do have to report the net worth of that on the FAFSA. If you own property somewhere, that all is reported as a real estate investment as far as investments are concerned. One other thing that's an investment, 529 college savings plans. So, and they're reported a little differently than everything else on the FAFSA. So, the way that it works with 529 savings plans, we are looking for parents that are owned by students or owned by parents. So we're looking at the ownership. If you're not sure who the owner is, you'll need to work with your plan administrator to find out who is the owner. Not the beneficiary, we need the owner. And we only want plans owned by students and plans owned by parents. Plans owned by grandparents, plans owned by aunt and uncles, we're not concerned about for investment net worth. So if we have this savings plan in either the student or the parent's name, it's going to get reported as a parent investment. And what it also is that it's all accounts owned by the parents or the student for any member of the household. So what does that mean? Parents, if you have multiple children and you've set up multiple plans, you need to add them all together and put the grand total on the FAFSA. That's the way it is, that's currently how it reads. I will read you directly from the help that would pop up when you're in the FAFSA. So for a student who must report parental information, the accounts are reported as parental investments, including all accounts owned by the student and all accounts owned by the parents for any member of the household. Now, the other thing that makes this weird is if you do actually have an account owned by the student, normally their assets, they put their cash savings checking on their side of the FAFSA. This is one spot where even if it's a student asset, it is reported as a parent asset, just to make life more difficult. I don't know. But anyway, that's how we report the 529 plans. One item that I do want to let you know about businesses, if you have a family-owned and controlled business with 100 or fewer employees, you currently do not have to report the net worth of the business. So again, family-owned and controlled, 100 or fewer full-time employees, you do not have to report the net worth of the business. There will be some changes to some of this asset information for 24-25, but again, I don't want to get into it because I don't want to confuse everybody tonight, and especially for my senior families, you need to fill it out the way that it is currently. And finally, the very last part before you sign is going to be a short 4-question demographic survey that should take 2 minutes to fill out, and then you will get to the part where you agree to the terms and sign the FAFSA. As I said in the beginning, both student and parent need to sign the FAFSA. With the agreement to terms, you're reporting everything as truthfully as you can. You're applying your own FSA ID to this application. And then, congratulations, you've made it to the end. When you get to a screen that actually says congratulations and your first name on it, you know you're done. If there are multiple children in college, you should get a space to click to start the next student's application to make it a little bit easier if you have to go from one into the other. And also, when you, on that confirmation page, you're also going to get some information about the colleges that you listed on the application. So we got our FAFSA done, but what else do we need to do in the financial aid process? So you want to make sure that there, with any of the colleges your student is interested in, are there any other forms I have to fill out? They may have their own college-specific form. They may ask you to fill out something called the CSS profile. This is a form put out by the College Board. It does cost money to complete it. It's used by a few hundred colleges and universities across the country, mainly private institutions, but there are some publics that use it. What do they use it for? They're using it for their institutional funds. They have a significant amount of institutional money to spend, but they want more information and they want to further refine who they're going to give those dollars to. So they want more information than what's on the FAFSA. So what does that mean? So I was told you a couple times the exemptions for investments on the FAFSA. Well, guess what? If you have to do the CSS profile, you'll probably be reporting those items on it. I talked about in divorce situations, we're only putting one parent on the FAFSA. Schools could ask for the non-custodial parents' information. So different applications with different purposes. So just realize if the school asks for the profile, make sure that you are completing it within their deadlines, and realize that it may have questions that are different on it from the FAFSA. How do you find out how much aid your student is eligible for? This comes through the financial aid award offer. You might receive this by mail, by email, maybe by logging into an online portal. However the school sends it to your student, it contains the same type of information. It's going to give you the amounts and types of aid that your student is eligible for the upcoming school year. In order to receive a financial aid award offer, you have to have sent the FAFSA to that institution, and the student needs to be admitted. And that would give the school the items that they would need in order to generate this financial aid award offer. When you're reviewing, make sure that you're taking any action required by the institutions. Do you need to accept this? Do you need to acknowledge receipt? Whatever it may be, just make sure that you're following the directions. Now, when we were talking about putting colleges on the FAFSA, my sample student had 15 colleges that they were interested in. So let's say it's a super stellar student. They got admitted into all 15 of those colleges that they put on their FAFSA. What does that mean? They will get 15 award offers, because you're going to get one from every institution from which you submit the FAFSA and you're admitted. So that's a lot of things to review, but keep in mind that's how the process works. You may also be asked to provide additional documentation. The federal government selects applicants to be reviewed in a process called verification. If your student is remaining in New Jersey and is potentially eligible for state aid, the state of New Jersey selects applicants to be verified, and the college can select applications for verification. If you're asked for more information, don't worry, you didn't do anything wrong. We're just making sure that the data you provided is correct. So whoever asks you for the information, just be sure to submit it as soon as possible, because your student's aid won't be finalized until we not only have what's asked for, but it's also been reviewed. And if you ultimately decide to use student loans, the school will walk you through the process for borrowing. Now, we realize that life happens in between the year of income that you need to put on the FAFSA and the time that the student is attending school. So if there's been a change in your circumstances, that is something that can be addressed at the college level. Please don't change your FAFSA. If that's going to happen, it will be done by the college itself. You'll be able to submit documentation of your circumstances, and the college will make the determination based on that information, and they'll make any updates as needed. I put a list of situations that may happen, and that is not an exhaustive list. It's just what we see most often. So if there's been job loss since 2021, or you were on unemployment and those benefits have ended, you've gotten a loss or a reduction in some sort of untaxed income or benefit, you have unreimbursed medical expenses. These are some of the types of things that a college can potentially look at and see if it changes the student's aid eligibility. So when we go through this process, we want to make sure that we're applying to all sources of aid possible. The biggest one we have is the college itself, institutional aid. You may see some colleges say they have merit-based aid. Merit-based aid is aid that's based on academic performance. Grades, maybe standardized test scores. I know some schools are test optional and things like that, so those scores may or may not come into their scholarship process, but merit means it's academically based. Schools may have need-based aid, so it's based on financial information. School may have one or the other or some of both. So again, something to know what the possibilities are at any institution. You complete your FAFSA, you've taken care of all the federal sources for aid, and if your student is staying in New Jersey, you also take care of the state aid process by completing the FAFSA. And then don't forget about some other sources that you have for aid, things like athletic scholarships, outside scholarships. These are scholarships from sources outside of a college or university. If I have any veterans in the audience, you may be able to transfer your benefits to your dependent. If I do, your first step is to the Veterans Administration to confirm your eligibility. Resident assistantships, that's where a student who lives on campus supervises a floor in a residence hall, and being a resident assistant comes with a financial component to it. There are also tax credits for higher education. You can read all about them in publication 970 from the IRS. So there are tax credits and deductions that are all for higher education. When you're reviewing all 15 of those financial aid award offers, you do want to know what you're looking at. So in this slide, I'm trying to show you what the different types of aid are so that you can understand what it is that you're looking at. So when you look at the award letter and you see something that says grant on the end of it, a grant is free money. So yes, you want the grants. Grants are generally awarded based on financial need, not all the time, but generally. So again, grants free, yay, we like that. Federal Work Study. This is a program through the federal government where students can work on campus and at community service positions. It's earned money. If a student is eligible for the Federal Work Study program, it would be listed on their financial aid award offer. Loans, borrowed money. So yes, if you see loan on the end of it, it is something that will have to be repaid. And finally, scholarships. On this slide, it says earned money for scholarships. Yes, it is earned money in the sense that you earn that scholarship because you have good grades, you have a talent, you have some sort of special characteristic, but it's also free, so you don't have to repay scholarships either. Okay, so now, one of the other handouts that I brought with me, that I didn't bring up with me, sorry, but there is a handout that is federal grant programs. So the grants that I have listed up there under the federal heading, those will all be listed on that federal grant sheet. I'll go over them kind of quickly. Just the federal Pell Grant is the federal government's main need-based grant program. Maximum for this year is $6,895. The FSEOG, that stands for the Federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant. It's a really long name. So that one is generally awarded in conjunction or along with students receiving the Pell Grant. One difference is that that supplemental grant runs out. So when you see deadlines for filing the FAFSA and you think you might be eligible, you want to make sure that you're getting your FAFSA in by that deadline, because types of aid that run out will be run out if you're filing your FAFSA after the deadline. So each school, we have a limited amount to spend, and once we spent it, there is no more. The Teach Grant is a grant for students interested in teaching. You do need to be interested in teaching in a high-need subject area in a low-income district. It's not need-based, so you don't have to worry about financial need. However, there is a teaching component after you graduate, and you need to make sure that you complete the teaching component, or else you have to repay the grant. So, great grant program, but just make sure that you read all the ins and outs before your student accepts a Teach Grant. One of the other handouts that I gave you is from the state of New Jersey. It says State of New Jersey on the top and says Tuition Aid Grant. This talks about the state's main need-based grant program, the Tuition Aid Grant Program, which is for students from New Jersey remaining in New Jersey for college. But on the back of it, on the bottom, it has need more information, has their phone number, their website, everything else you might need for learning more about the rest of the items that I have on the screen. EOF is called the Educational Opportunity Fund. It's a program for students both academically and financially disadvantaged. NJ STARS is for students in the top 15% of their class to attend their local community college and have tuition and required fees paid for. You must complete that portion, so you must be an NJ STARS 1 student. If you successfully complete NJ STARS 1, you can move on to NJ STARS 2 and attend any of the four-year institutions in New Jersey and receive up to a $2,500 scholarship. So that's more of a merit-based program from the state of New Jersey. The other two that I have listed there, the Community College Opportunity Grant and the Garden State Guarantee, are need-based programs at the community college level and then also at the four-year public institution level. So if your student is looking at staying in New Jersey, I do recommend going to HESA. It's the Higher Education Student Assistance Authority, their website, and you can read, they have fact sheets on every single program that they have. So you can read all about what may be possible if your student opts to stay in New Jersey. Okay, so I mentioned a little bit a while ago, outside scholarships, private scholarships. These are scholarships from sources outside of a college or university. Make sure you're using any of the local resources here through your counseling office for any local scholarship opportunities, and then using the web for a wider reach. The last handout that I brought is from the website FastWeb that I have up there that has tips about applying for these types of scholarships. They are a free database that you can search for scholarship opportunities. Just make sure that you're using free websites to search for scholarships. You do not need to pay for scholarship opportunities nor to actually apply for a scholarship. And for my senior families, this is the time to get started on this process. You can't wait until the summertime. Summertime is when organizations have already picked their recipients and are sending money to the colleges that they're attending. So it's a good time to get yourself started. Things usually heat up once we get into the new year, but there are some opportunities that are out there now. If anyone's looking at being an accountant, the New Jersey CPA Association, their high school scholarship opportunity is available now. The application is open. That's one of the ones I know off the top of my head that's available. There are some other big, large national ones that are available. They're like Coca-Cola scholars are open. Dr. Pepper tuition giveaway is available, but these are really large national programs. Employment. Employment is another funding opportunity. Like I said, federal work study, your FAFSA is the application for it. Need-based work program allows you to work on campus and at community service jobs. If you don't qualify for work study, maybe there is another way for you to work on campus, and certainly off-campus jobs are another option. Loans, you may need loans. If you exhaust all your grant and scholarship opportunities and you still need more funding to make your students' #1 choice a reality, you want to know what the options are. The federal direct loan program is for students. No cosigner, no credit check involved. $5,500 is what they can borrow in their first year, $6,500 in the second year, and $7,500 in their third and fourth year. One of the other handouts is all the federal loan programs. So one sheet is for the grants, one sheet is for the loans. The Federal Parent Plus loan is a credit-based loan for parents. So if a parent decides to borrow it, they are the one responsible for repayment. And then also there are private education loans offered by various banks, lenders, credit unions. They are credit-based loans that they allow students to borrow, but they need a credit-worthy cosigner. So particularly for freshmen, sophomores, at least be prepared for 4 years of potentially borrowing for or co-signing for your student, because they just won't qualify for a credit-based loan without that assistance. With both the PLUS loan and a private education loan, you can borrow up to the cost of attendance that I talked about in the beginning. So that means you can borrow enough to cover the bill. It means you can borrow extra money for books and supplies. You can borrow money for transportation expenses as well as personal expenses. Obviously, it's loan money. You will have to repay it, but if that's the situation you're in, you know you have that as a resource for those additional expenses. Payment plans. The college might have a way for you to make monthly tuition payments. That's not a loan, so there's no interest. You may have a monthly, enrollment fee into the plan, but it's a way for you to fit some payments into your monthly budget, maybe reduce how much you might need to borrow. Okay, so a few more tips before we close out for today. Make sure you're reading everything. You don't want to miss out on an opportunity because you didn't read something. So I know that there's a lot of information coming by mail, by email, all different ways. Just make sure you're checking everything, any action needed, and if not, move on. Read the instructions carefully so you're answering things correctly right from the start. Yes, the FAFSA can be corrected, but it's a lot easier to have a correct application right from the start, and it won't, and then also with having to make corrections or maybe something that you have to document to correct, that's going to slow down the aid process. Review your forms before submitting and keep copies. You have the opportunity to print, save the FAFSA before you submit it. If you're borrowing loans, make sure you're keeping copies of promissory notes. Students need to be involved in the financial aid process. The FAFSA is theirs. The aid belongs to them. And also when they're at our school, they're the ones we're contacting when we need information. So they should have at least a little idea of what's going on aid-wise. And also, there is a privacy law that kicks in once they start classes. And they actually have to give permission for others to access their education records. So you can add this to conversations you'll need to have in the summer about information, because it doesn't cover just financial aid and billing information. We're talking about grades and disciplinary information as well. Usually I say the financial aid part's an easy conversation because most students don't want to deal with it anyway, but they might not want you to know their grades. So that's the little stickier part of that conversation. And also, if you're having trouble, need help, or tonight, if you have some very specific questions, talk to the financial aid office at their school your student would really like to attend. Find out how do they handle whatever the situation might be. We're here to help you. We're here to help you for free, and particularly at our own institution, we know how we do everything. So don't hesitate to talk to us, make a friend. I have made friends. I've met families at high school nights like this and known them. They've opted to attend Monmouth, and I've known them all the way through, and sometimes through a master's degree. And I'm sure pretty soon I'll be knowing students through doctoral programs because we keep expanding those. So might even be some students like that. Sometimes they know the siblings too. So make a friend so that every time you call or email, you don't have to go through your story each time. All righty, thank you. You have made it through the presentation, congratulations. And now we will move into the Q&A portion. I am happy to answer any general questions that anyone might have this evening. And I hope that you have a few. Last week I went to a school and nobody had any questions. And I said, I wasn't that good. I'm like, somebody has to have a question. Nobody asked me anything. So I would really love it if somebody has some sort of question for me. That would be awesome. Anyone? Yes, right here in the middle. Okay. So yeah, if your student's looking at both inside New Jersey and outside New Jersey, I don't think there's any reason that you have to necessarily contact the Higher Education Student Assistance Authority. They'll automatically receive the FAFSA information when it's completed. I think it might be a good idea to check their website to review the types of aid that your student might be eligible for, so you have an understanding of what's possible. Yes, so, yep. I thought I saw, oh, yes, up there. Yes.
For the individual schools, like say you've got 15 schools it's applying to, should you start those, if there's supplemental applications for those financially, should you start those now even though you don't really accept them? Or do you wait to find out if it's accepted?
Sure, so should we wait to fill this FAFSA out for acceptances to come through or any other forms, or get them done now? Earlier is better. I don't recommend waiting until a student is admitted, because that's, all right, they're gonna be admitted, you're gonna be excited, but you're also going to know, okay, what's the aid going to be? Then you have to sit down and fill out this form, wait for it to be processed, and then wait for the school to send you the information. So it's better if we have it, doesn't hurt anything, comes into our database and sits and waits for the time for it to be awarded. So, and certainly, you always want to make sure that you're meeting any deadlines as well. Sure. Good, I'll grab a drink of water.
I'll talk really slow. I'll also add on to that too, the admission office and financial aid office oftentimes are working separately. They will chat with each other. Kristen, I'm sure, could speak to that at Monmouth, but a lot of people think that when they get their offer of acceptance, they're also going to get that full financial aid picture, and often that's happening separately, right? So that's something, let's say you're getting a decision in December for some of our early students, or early applications, you might not get that financial aid decision until February or something along those lines, okay? So that's why it is good to kind of lie all of your responses out and see them all come together. So a good thing to just kind of, a lot of times we think they work together, and I'd like to think they're all friends, but sometimes it doesn't always work that way in terms of the way they're processing.
Yes, because generally too, if you're looking at a school with merit-based aid, you'll get that information with an acceptance, but then potentially not the rest. So it's just, that's just one piece of the whole financial aid puzzle. Did I see some more hands? Yes, down here? Yes. Yes. So, yes, a little confusing. Studentaid.gov, you can file the FAFSA from that site. There'll be a menu option that says FAFSA form. You can also just go directly to FAFSA.gov and file the FAFSA. But FAFSA.gov is really just a direct shot to the FAFSA itself. When you're at studentaid.gov, you have there are other options. There's going to be other information potentially on the screen at that point, because that's the comprehensive site for everything federal aid related. So either site will work. Okay? Yes. Yes. So the question is about the FSA ID and multiple students in college. So parents, if you already have your own FSA ID from the older child, that's what you continue to use. That's yours. You can apply it to all your children. You can apply it for yourself if you decide to go back to school. The only thing that you'll need to do is then the second child will need their own FSA ID. Yes.
How is financial aid received?
Oh, yes. Wouldn't that be awesome? So, no, that is a very good question, because we have had some students coming in recently, they've been like, well, how do I get that? So no, it's a good question. So in this electronic age, everything is electronic. So all of the funds, if it's, so my school gives out merit-based aid. So if it's your merit scholarship, it's literally coming from one account in the university to your student. If it's federal aid, we as the university take care of that. We pull down funds through a process with the federal government that then we are able to distribute out to the students. And that includes the loans as well. If a student signs the appropriate paperwork for the federal loans, it'll work the same way for the direct loan program, Parent Plus loan program. If state aid, same thing. State of HESA sends us money, we apply it to the student accounts. If you are doing a private loan, so from an outside source, it's still all electronic. The funds are sent directly to the institution. We apply to the student's account, and it goes from there. So yeah, so really there's nothing that you should have to worry about someone handing you outside of like the scholarship dinner where you might get the Rotary Club scholarship. Yes, that may be a check, but the programs that a university is going to handle, it all comes to the university first and is applied that way. Yes, up top.
Follow up on what he asked before.
Yes.
If you have a student who already signed up for FAFSA, but he no longer is attending college,
Mm-hmm.
he discontinued, can you still sign in with that same FAFSA ID?
So if you have a student who went to school but then stopped going to school, are they going back again? So they'd have no reason to sign in. If you have student number 2, or are you concerned about your FSA ID? Oh, it doesn't matter. Again, think of it, it's your personal thing. Just like you have your own PIN number for an ATM card, like you go to the ATM, that's your PIN. It's like that. So that's yours in perpetuity. I believe after so much time of non-use, you may have to change the password, but otherwise that's still your username and password. Yes. So question about, does it matter the order that you create the FSA ID? No, it doesn't matter, student, parent first, whatever you want to do. And if I didn't mention, it is something you can do prior to October 1. So if you are that excited tonight and you need to do something, you can go home tonight and create them if you want to. It can also be done when you're in the FAFSA itself, but it is something that can also be done ahead of time, and order doesn't matter. And yes, second question? No, you won't. You would just go for, so if anyone's doing, let me see how fast I can get back. There we go. So when you're on the site to create an account, you're going, when you hit, because down here it says get started. When you hit get started, you're just going to enter the information for the student now that just needs an ID. You're not trying to do it through your own. It's going to be a whole new setup for child number 2. And I think I saw a hand up above. Yes. Exactly, yes, you are doing the same thing twice, but for 2 different people. So obviously name is different, social security number is different, but it is the same exact process for both of you. Yes, there's a lot of intertwining that can happen. What I would recommend is, for anybody with the FSA ID, whether you already have one, you have one for one child, you need one for the next, be sure that, they always tell you don't write down passwords and things like that. This is something you gotta find a way to keep this all straight, because then you're putting the wrong kid on the wrong thing and whatnot. So you want to make sure that you're keeping straight what's my information as me as the parent, what did I set up as my username and my password, what did we set up as Susie's, what is Johnny's, so we have that all separate. That's for our access and signing the FAFSA. When we're actually in the application, that's when we want to be sure that we're entering the appropriate information on the appropriate page. And yes, in the middle.
Level that says anything over
So, all right. I always have to get one. So, no. Oh, yes. No, there is no hard and fast cutoff point. Here's the reason why. Because this FAFSA is not just looking at your income, like we went over. There's income, there's assets, there's income for parents, there's income for students. There's the household size, there's the number in college. So I could have two families where the income could be exactly the same, but a family with 5 in the household and 2 in college is different from a household of 2 with 1 in college. Totally different amount of people living on that same income. So there's way too many variables to be able to just say this dollar figure is it. I mean, okay, yes, Bill Gates' kids, if they went to college, they're not getting anything. But the other piece is people always say, well, then why am I filling this out? I make too much money. Well, first of all, if you've never filled it out, you don't know if you make too much money. So you should at least do it once. Go through the process one time. Let your student find out, okay, this is where I'm attending, yay, where I go. Once that happens, ask the financial aid office. Depending upon what aid you've opted to maintain, do I have to keep filing the FAFSA? This is what I'm going to want. This is what I'm going to keep doing for each year. Do I have to file it in subsequent years? If they're like, nope, you don't need it for anything you have, then you don't have to worry about it. But if they say, yes, you need that FAFSA for X, Y, and Z in that student's financial aid package, then you do want to file it every year. Yeah, does that help your friend, I hope? Okay.
On the heels of that, another question we get often, right, similarly is, right, is it worth me filing? Should I file? We do like to point out that there are certain schools out there, this is a very important question to perhaps ask different colleges. They may say, in order to provide scholarships, sometimes that's a state rule, they need the FAFSA on file. So for example, Stacy, our rep from Penn State, she often will tell us, if there is no FAFSA on file, they will not be able to offer scholarship for that student. So that is something to keep in mind, right? So a lot of sometimes our families or parents will say, I don't need to fill it out. That could, in some nuanced cases, be a difference maker for a scholarship consideration. Again, that's to Kristen's point that every financial aid office is a little different. I believe that might be a Pennsylvania state situation in which why they need that on file, but that's just one that always rings in my head that I'll use kind of as a counter of, I know it's a lot of extra work to fill out the FAFSA, but if you're considering some schools, they may only provide that if they have something on file.
See, right down here. Yes. So question is about the CSS and are they independent of each other? Yes, 2 completely different forms. The FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, comes from the federal government and is for all the federally run programs. CSS Profile is a private form and colleges can select to use it or not for awarding their institutional aid. So FAFSA is for federal and in New Jersey state aid purposes, but the CSS Profile is going to be for those schools that use it for the funds that come from the college itself. I'm going to say, from what you see, don't they want, if a CSS school, they want the FAFSA and the CSS, right? Sorry, yes, I do know what was asked. If you maybe either don't want to, don't have time to fill out the FAFSA, if it's a school that takes the CSS Profile, do you only fill that out? And I'm under the impression that if a school wants a CSS Profile, they also want you to file the FAFSA, but you want to speak a little more?
I can add a little bit more to that because there's a good amount of schools that students apply to here that do utilize the CSS Profile. So it's done through the College Board. As Kristen said, it's basically looking at institutional funds. So while it's asking you for an extra step, that's generally a good thing because they're not associated with the government and giving money. They're looking at my internal organization's money? Can I provide some grants or loans or things to them that in that sense? For example, usually you're going to see if a student, so the CSS profile does have a listing, and it's on our college financial aid website, link on our college and career site as well, that lists all the schools that do require the CSS profile. To your specific question, yes, I agree with you, Kristen. If a school wants CSS, they're gonna also want and need the FAFSA. FAFSA is kind of like the first tier, and the CSS is maybe sprinkles on top, depending on the school that does it. Usually these are private schools, usually schools that have maybe larger endowments where they can look internally at their institutional money. And so, for example, Fordham University is one of the most popular ones we get every year. I'll get students mid-year like, Fordham won't release my admission decision. It's like, well, let's log into your admission portal, and there's a big red check that, big red X that says CSS profile is not filled out, right? They will actually, they're pretty diligent about that. So there are schools out there that will do that, but it is, two separate processes, but generally can be beneficial to you because it's that institutional aid you were talking about, Kristen.
Here in the green. Is it a question from all of you? Oh, so with the FSA ID for parents, only one parent will sign off on the FAFSA, so you can decide who that is. Yes. Okay, did I have? Oh, over here. Sure, there are. Even within loans, there is the hierarchy of what would be the best. So the best one would be from the Federal Direct Program, which is the one that students can borrow on their own. There's what's called a subsidized loan, and it would be on the sheet that I brought with the loan programs. What's beneficial about that loan program, if you qualify for it, it is a need-based loan. It does not accrue interest while the student's in school or for the 6-month grace period after they leave school. So generally you can't go somewhere and be like, hi, I want a loan and I don't want to pay interest on it for at least 4.5 years. So the government is subsidizing the interest on a subsidized loan. So that would be the best one. If you don't qualify for subsidized, or also as part of the $5,500 that a first-year student can borrow, there's funding through the unsubsidized loan. So that loan does have interest accruing on it, but generally the rate is going to be lower than what you're getting either through a Parent Plus loan or a private loan. So we usually recommend maximizing subsidized, unsubsidized first before moving on to a Parent Plus loan or a private loan. Also, with the subsidized and unsubsidized loans, there are multiple repayment plans and forgiveness options too. So that would be really more the order that you'd want to take them in. If you've been hearing in the news about the forgiveness program, the subsidized, unsubsidized, and plus loans are ones that fall under the forgiveness program just because that's in the news now. So have no idea what that might be in the future, but just, to make that connection since that's something that's in the news now. Yes, up top. So yes, if your student decides to change schools, whether it's mid-year, at the end of one year going into the next, if you didn't have that school on their FAFSA already, yes, you would need to add them on. If it was a mid-year transfer, then you'd be doing it on your current year FAFSA. Obviously, you could adjust if it's doing it for the following school year. But yeah, and no aid, the aid doesn't move from one school to another. You're putting that other school on the FAFSA, and the new school is awarding the student and getting the funds directly. Yes? Yes, it is. Every year, October 1st, every year for every student that you have in college. Yes? Yes. Yes. Sure, so with the 529 plans, does the FAFSA force you to use the money? The FAFSA does not force anybody to do anything, but that would be at your discretion how you wanted to spend out the money. I am not a financial planner. So I recommend that if you have a planner, or talk with the plan administrator about what might be your best strategy for making payments, but no, you're not forced to use all of it at one time. And then if you are using it, obviously the balance is going to go down since you're from year to year. If you're using it and filing the FAFSA each year, your balance would change. Sorry, I don't know that specifically, and I don't want to give you incorrect information, because potentially there can be tax implications if it's not spent on the things that are allowed. So I would refer you back like either into probably information from the IRS or from the plan itself about what are things that you can spend it on. Also, just for those families that do have them, if you are planning to use it, you do want to make sure that you have been in touch with your plan administrator. What form do I have to fill out to actually take a distribution now that it's time to do that? How can I get the money? Do I get it? Do you send it to the college? How does that whole process work to make sure that you get the funds to the college by the time they need it for the bill? Yes. Mm-hmm. Oh, no, if you have room on the FAFSA, so if you have 8 colleges your student is interested in, 8 will fit on the FAFSA, put them all on there. Don't wait, there's no reason to wait. Put everything on there, let the schools have it so that we have that information and you're waiting on us versus us waiting on you to complete it. That's fine. If they don't apply, if they're not admitted, no harm, no foul. The information just sits in our database and it just is there. And then maybe they transfer and then we need it or something like that, but no, not a problem. Yes. Okay, so yes, October 1 is day 1, okay? Not the end, it's the very beginning. I liken it to when the horses come out of the gate at the race. I live right near Monmouth Park Racetrack, so that's why I can use that analogy. But as far as deadline is concerned, that's something to find out from the colleges. That's what you're really going to want to find out. When does that school want it by, so that you meet that deadline, and they may have multiple deadlines attached to the different types of admission deadlines as well. Because in reality, the FAFSA is good it's open for more than a year. But that's not going to help you when the bill is due in the summertime. People ask, well, when can I file it? Well, sure, you could wait till September after they've moved in, but your bill will be due in August, and you won't have any aid on it if you wait that long. So that's why I don't like to get too confusing with that. October 1 is day 1. You might have November 15th even maybe for early decision, maybe December 15th for early action. So again, and schools that don't have a specific deadline, then they're going to award on a first come, first serve basis. So sooner you can do it, the better. Yes. So yes, 529 plans do count within the assets under the question for investment net worth. That's where it would be reported. Yes. So for athletic scholarships, if your student is being recruited by a school that offers athletic scholarships, they are determined by the coach of the individual sport. Not determined by a financial aid office, but what my office has to do, we have to make sure that it's in compliance with athletic funding, with the other awards that the student has and things like that. But ultimately, it would be the coach that would make the decision if the student will be funded and for how much. And that can vary from sport to sport, even within the same institution, and from student to student on the team. So yes, for athletics, they do need to make sure that they register for the NCAA clearinghouse. if they are looking at a Division I or a Division II school. This is a requirement. They'll be having to, I believe, provide or you provide the transcripts. Sorry, I'm just we're on the, did they pass the clearinghouse end of things? But I know they're making sure, NCAA Clearinghouse is making sure that the student has completed the appropriate types of courses to be eligible to compete, and also that they ultimately graduate from high school so that they are eligible to compete. You could just be able to go to the NCAA website, and it's the clearinghouse. That's what students need to sign up for if they're potentially going to be playing a sport, I believe funded or non-funded, at a Division I or Division II school. Yes. Yes. No. No, so the FAFSA, because you're filing it from year to year, it's not doing projective math. What it's going to do, currently with the way that the assets are computed, when they're reported as a parent asset, there's a sliding scale of the percentage of the total of those assets. So the total between the cash savings and checking, the investment business, it's going to be a percentage of that will go into the EFC. And the percentage is also linked to the age of the oldest parent, because that's why you have to provide your birth date on the FAFSA, because it will determine who's older. And as you get older as parents, it protects more of those assets as you're getting closer to retirement. Well, so as far as parents are concerned, if the parents are married, you're applying with both of the parents on the FAFSA. If it is a divorce situation, then it's the custodial parent, not the parent that's older. No, it's not becoming that in 24, 25 either. So no. Any other questions to back that up? Okay. All right, anybody else? Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, but that part I can't help you with. But
That's the after hours portion.
yes. Well, I thank you all for coming and staying till the bitter end. I do wish you the best of luck in your students' college search process and the college funding process. So thank you again.